This week in the Torah, we move into a huge transition between the story of Yaakov, Jacob, and his family, and the transformation of Yaakov, Jacob, and his family, and the Shvatim, and the tribes, into Am Yisrael, into a people. And it begins in a way that is remarkable. In our comfort, our privilege of living in the land of Egypt, imperceptibly, we move from privilege and power to servitude. And it pivots in this verse, a verse that is impossible to ignore on this Shabbat of all Shabbatot. Vayaka melech hadash al Mitzrayim, asher lo yadat Yosef. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Even if, as a rabbi, I wanted to avoid the inauguration, here it is. A new king arises who wants to forget Joseph. The rabbis, understandably, have a field day with this. What does it mean that a new king arose? Is it literal? A new king? Seems to say in the verse that a new king arose. And so there are those in the school that say, no, it was a new king, just like it says in the verse. Simple, easy to read. And there are those who say that this new king was not a new king at all, but new policies, a new way. And that the forgetting of Joseph is not because he had never met him, but because he didn't want anyone to remember Joseph and what Joseph represented. And although I'm sure around the country and maybe even around the city, there are those who are using this as an opportunity to stoke both illegitimate and legitimate concerns that all of us should have at this moment. I'm sure there are plenty of sermons that you'll be able to listen to after Shabbat that are going to portend of horrible things immediately off the bat. And certainly, if there's any indication in the last couple of weeks, we have what to be nervous about. But I want to focus on heroes, because the Torah does. Even though the Torah will not name this particular leader, we don't know who the king was, and that's done on purpose. In a book that is called Names, it leaves out a name. And so in order to allow us to read history through this unnamed king, it could be any king, and there are a dime a dozen. But the first names given in the book of Names to new characters, they hold a key, and so does another person in a moment, to the two ways I want us to walk out of this service and out of this weekend going forward. Shifra and Pua. Remarkable. The first named people in the book of Names are the two midwives who are named Hebrew midwives. Miyaldot Ivriot. Shem Achat, Shifra, V'Shem Shenit Pua. Oh, do we know their names? They stand out from the crowd. Their anonymity is not present. They are Shemot. There's a name there. There's a Shifra and there's a Pua. And Shifra and Pua represent what everybody always says in any good email you need to have, which is a CTA, a call to action. Shifra and Pua represent an axis of resistance that has its way in finding a moral perch from which everything is measured. One is not partisan to any party. One is partisan in the text reading to God. They answer to a higher authority. They answer to a principle. They answer to integrity. And through their small acts that were quite risky and dangerous, defying Pharaoh's decree to kill all of the male-born children, Shifra and Pua stand for all of us forever as a reminder that revolutions happen in small moments, in moments where we remember our values, moments when we're called on the carpet, moments that sometimes are imperceptible but are nonetheless impactful. Shifra and Pua, the first two names in the book of names. Shifra and Pua. But here is the second moment of resistance, and it's going to come from an unlikely source. And in this person, so much respect for the Torah. The Torah now introduces us to another heroine, another remarkable woman, another conscientious objector, and in the most unlikely of places. The text will tell us in chapter 2, Vatered bat Paro, and the daughter of Pharaoh went down to rinse herself by the Nile, and her maidens are walking along the Nile with her. Vatera esateva betoch asuf, and she saw a little basket in the reeds. Vatishlach et amata vatikacheh, and she sent out her slave girl or her helper to go fetch the basket. What did she think was going to be in the basket? Like, who's in the basket? Who's sending children into the Nile? This is a smart woman. She knows what she's doing. Verse 6, Vatiftach, she opens it, Vatireu es hayeled, and she sees the child. V'hinei na'ar bocheh, and the child is crying. Remember we started that way tonight? With Moshe Leib Sasov, the teachings about crying children. She saw a crying child, and then the Torah tells us, Vatachmol alav, and she had compassion for him. And she said out loud, Mialdea ivrim zeh. Doesn't everybody know Mialdea ivrim, this is a Hebrew child? Are Egyptians sending their babies down the Nile? The text wants us to know something. She could have said whatever she wanted to say. She could have said, it's an Egyptian child. It wouldn't have mattered. Do you think anybody there would have told on her? There would have been some scandal. The text wants us to know that this daughter of this genocidal leader, this daughter was moved. She was moved to name the child as a Jew at great personal risk, to defy her father's orders, and to also upend our own reading of the text. You want to know, this is called not a call to action, but a CTC, a call to care. And a call to care is not a Jewish call or a Palestinian call or an Israeli call or a non-Jewish call or a Christian call. It's a human call. And the very text which is the foundation of our own particularism, the text about the Jewish people and our slavery, has embedded within it our universalism and our unwillingness to lose hope in even the most hardened of people. We don't give up on humanity, even if humanity sometimes and often has given up on us. The call to care is a call, first and foremost, that is in perception. It's in a willingness to see the humanity in the other. It's a willingness to give them the benefit of the doubt, to let them move us. Vatachmol alav, chemla gedola. She has great compassion for this child. There's even a Hasidic teaching that says, why did it say that she saw him crying? It should have said she heard him crying. What does it mean that she saw him crying? And there's a Hasidic teaching from the Kotzker Rebbe that says because she had the ability to see him crying without him actually making a sound. Gesundheit. She could see him crying. She could see his humanity, and even that awakened in her. In the daughter of Hitler, in the daughter of Saddam Hussein, in the daughter of Yahya Sinwar, in the daughter of our enemy, in the daughter of whomever. That's right here. I'm not making it up. So here we are faced on this Shabbat of a new king who doesn't know Joseph. And the Torah will tell us in great detail about the imperceptible ways that our freedoms are taken from us and that we must be wary, we must be attuned. And it gives us two different models, a CT A call to action, Shifra and Pua, small acts of resistance, small acts of remembering that you make a difference in your everyday life. It doesn't have to be big and grandiose, although it could be. But Shifra and Pua are remembered, and then this unnamed, remarkable heroine, the daughter of our enemy, who was so profoundly moved by the sight of this Hebrew child that she adopted him. And the Torah makes it all possible. A call to compassion, a call to care, a call to see. I was really blessed this past week, as Mary Beth said, to be 3 times in your home, in the home of someone who was known as Peter Yarrow, but his Hebrew name is Pesach. His Hebrew name was Pesach. If I had a hammer, the answers are blowing in the wind, all of the ways in which it's possible for us to both hold Shifra and Pua and the daughter of Pharaoh in our hearts, to be called to action, small, medium, and large, to make sure that we are vigilant and diligent, and also to walk out of shul and to look at someone with the daughter of Pharaoh's eyes. If anybody's ever heard the Hebrew name Batya or Basya, we actually, our second Chazan was Chazan Basya. That's the daughter of Pharaoh in the tradition. We'll talk about that tomorrow morning during our Torah study. That the Jewish folklore says that God said that you called my son Moses your son, I will call you my daughter. Batya means daughter of God. Batya, Basya in Ashkenazi pronunciation. She merited to become the daughter of the Holy One because she had Chamla. And not only that, the Midrash says that Moses had at least 10 names. But what's the only name that we called him by in the Torah? The name that was given to him by the daughter of Pharaoh, Moshe. God says, from now on, Moshe, the Redeemer, will be called by the name that you gave him, that you saw in him. If anybody wants to know one of the most radical teachings of the Torah, point them to these verses. That the Redeemer of the Jewish people grew up in the house of the enemy. That the Redeemer of the Jewish people might have learned a thing or two about compassion for all of humanity through his adopted mother. And then as we go forward into a world that we want to see, it doesn't mean naivete or innocence. It certainly does not mean passivism or blind ignorance and willful ignorance, but it means a return to an ocular compassion, a vision of compassion, eyes that are awake. Calls to action and calls to care. Both of those are available to us if we choose to see them. And how we will wield both of them will obviously require great wisdom. It is a narrow bridge. It certainly is. This living is narrow. Vayikar, but the essence is don't be afraid. Shifra and Pua, they weren't afraid. The daughter of Pharaoh, she wasn't afraid. It's going to take all of us to rise up. Please rise. On page 70.